Hi everyone, and thank you very much for being here with me again. Lesson 20 of the Spring Security Fundamentals series, and today we discuss about securing reactive applications. We are coming to almost the end of this playlist, and the reactive applications, even though they are not as many as the non-reactive ones, it's still an important part of the Spring ecosystem. And guess what? Spring Security helps you a lot with securing them as well. So that's what we discussed today. If you are here with me live, you have a live chat. You can ask the questions in the live chat. If you're not here with me live, no worries. You can still ask your questions in the comment section, or you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I will make my best to answer you as short as possible. So with that being said, let me share you my screen and we will get straight into the example, because I know you like coding. I like coding a lot because I'm a developer and that's what we do. And I will create a reactive application. So how were we actually naming them? I think the convention at the beginning of the playlist was something like this. So this is the C20, and I'm going to select Reactive Web and of course Spring Security. And I'm gonna show you that what you've learned already is kind of applicable. So there are not so many differences. We will use different objects. We will use different methods. For a very good reason. The reactive application works totally different than a non-reactive one, and it was needed to be developed differently, so we can't like reuse completely what we have learned till now, but they have been made in such a way in which they resemble very much what you have already learned. So that means you will not need a dramatic effort to understand these differences. You can compare them and you will see, we will today compare them and you will see that they are very, very similar. So if you've worked until now with me, I promise you it will be very easy to understand how security works, how Spring Security works for reactive applications. By the way, in this video, I'm not going to explain what a reactive application is, and we are not going to talk about mono, flux, routes, different ways to write them in Spring and stuff like that. For that, I have a separate playlist. You can find it on this channel. It's free for you. So if what you need is learn more about reactive web applications with Spring Reactive, then this is not a video. You have to search for that one. Also, I will somehow consider that you know a few basics at least about reactive applications. So if you don't have them already, you might find this video difficult, or maybe you will not understand completely everything. So again, my advice is go back to the Spring Reactive Fundamentals series and watch that first. So today it's only an episode about Spring Security. Remember, we are still in the Spring Security playlist and we want to discuss this very important part, which is securing reactive applications as well. So I'm going to create this project. Hopefully it will be soon indexed, and then we will be able to start configuring. I will actually create a route first. I sometimes name them endpoints. Theoretically, that's not correct, so I should name them routes. But since Spring helps us exposing them using REST controller and the same annotations like for non-reactive applications for our commodity, sometimes I'm very I simply call them endpoints because I'm tricked into doing that. But again, that's something related to reactive, and I will not dig into that today. So I just need a route for demonstration purposes. So let me name my package controllers and then create a demo controller, a very simple endpoint that returns a flux. And then we will test it first, see if it's working. You will see that same as for non-reactive applications, it's by default sort of protected. I mean, there is some configuration, some convention configuration applied by Spring Boot. Since we are using Spring Boot, it applies that convention configuration, but then we need to change that because you learned already that the convention configuration is only to make sure that the dependency works properly, and then of course you need to configure it, because using some self generated password in the console, it's not a way to go in a real world application. So demo controller for me. And going into REST controller. And public, we set the flux of whatever, doesn't really matter, does it? I will import it. A flux is a stream of values. It doesn't work like a stream in the Stream API, so there are differences between, and I discussed those differences in the Reactive Spring Reactive playlist. But you can imagine, if you've never used it, that it's kind of a stream, or you can consider it kind of a collection of values. Flux is actually a producer of values. Now we have a producer of many values, which is Flux, a producer of only one value, which is called mono in Spring Reactive, in Project Reactive actually, that Spring Reactive relies on. And I can let me actually do something more. Let me actually make this produce events. So say media type, just to see the reactive part of it. So media type event stream value, and then I will add a simple delay between the elements to somehow simulate these events. Otherwise you will see just the values going into the result, and maybe that wouldn't be clear enough that this is really something reactive. While my app is starting, let me see the first question here. So I watched lesson 11 where you implemented OAuth, and when I try to get the token in Postman, it gives me invalid client, and I can't follow along anymore, so the client credentials are correct. So invalid client is not necessarily about the client credentials. It can be because of any of the parameters you set in the application, in the registered client and the request. Of what you should do, Yon, is you should verify that all the parameters you registered in the application match with those you added on the request. And it should work. I promise you it's working. If it's working for me, it should work for you as well. Also, you can try with the example on my GitHub account and use exactly the same parameters as I do, and it will work. Again, applications cannot work differently for different developers. It can't work on my machine and not work on yours. If you still can't manage to solve the problem, find me on LinkedIn and I will talk with you and we will find out together what's wrong, okay? Cool, thanks for the question, and I'm pretty sure we will solve that problem, so no worries. And meanwhile, the application also started, and you see it's actually behaving the same like it happens with non-reactive applications. So you remember that the self-configuration provided by Spring Security is HTTP basic and form login with the user and generated password which you find in the console. This is a password that generates every time. So what I'm going to do here is say HTTP localhost. Of course you don't see the other screen, sorry for that. I'm going to put it here and try to access the endpoint. It redirects me to the login page, that's the default, and then I'm going to say user and I'm going to paste the password from the console, and this should now work. So you can see now Chrome is a reactive client, so it knows how to process the text events, and you can see the text events the way they have been processed up to the end when the onComplete event has been found. So pretty much the same. Now, how do we configure it? I'm pretty sure it's essential for you to find out how we configure it. And again, I promised you that this is very similar to non-reactive applications. So yes, we will need a configuration class. So let me add the configuration class, and then let me add the security config, the security config class here, which is a configuration, and hear me, I will have to add a bean of a filter. Now, if it was security filter chain for non-reactive applications, for reactive ones, we will use security web filter chain. So here is the first difference. You see, that's not a big difference, but it's a first difference that you need to know. So the name of the bean will be security web filter chain. I am still going to add it as a very simple bean in the app context, and then you would use HTTP security. Here is server HTTP security HTTP. So again, a second difference here, and of course you want to return a value of security web filter chain, but this is similar to the non-reactive applications. So here we are, we have created the filter chain that we need for our configuration. Good. Now just try it. It's very simple. In terms of authentication, you still have the same method. So fortunately, from this point of view, say you want HTTP basic and form login, then you would do that in the same way. If you want, for example, a resource server, you would do that in the same way. So I'm not going even to talk more about the authentication, because this is now clearly same as for the non-reactive application, so just take it as is. However, in case of authorization, things are very little different, and that's instead of authorize, it was previously named authorized requests, now it's named authorized HTTP requests for non-reactive applications. Keep in mind, for reactive applications it's called authorized exchange. It's a bit different because of the terminology we use for reactive applications. So the term was on purpose selected different, because this is how we refer to the events when discussing about the way reactive works. And yeah, now you have to use the proper naming in the method names. That's something we learn with clean coding, and the guys who implemented this did a very good job by keeping the convention in the method names. So we call it authorized exchange, and then we have similar to like any request, you'd say any request, now you say any exchange, definitely, and then you have the same methods you'd use with the non-reactive application. So here's already what you see. It's the equivalent to what you have had as a convention configuration, because you know the convention configuration basically enables HTTP basic and phone login and sets all the routes to be authenticated. We also want to configure the user details management. So the user details management, if you remember from the non-reactive applications, and I hope you remember it because we have done that in almost any video of this playlist, is the user details service contract. Now, user details service contract is no longer viable for what we need here, and the reason is it's not designed to work with reactive producers and subscribers. So in a reactive application, and again I'm going to refer to my reactive playlist in case you want to see more details, you'll find them there. Everything is stands on this functional methodology where you have the producers, you have the subscribers, and you have operations in between them. And it's very important that everything stands inside the way you need to put them. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. Otherwise it's called a blocking operation, and the whole philosophy falls, because the threads cannot share the tasks anymore, and they will end up getting blocked. And instead of benefiting from what the reactive architectures provides you, you will basically just create a non-reactive app in the end. So as I think I was saying in one of those videos there, and if I didn't say it there, I should have had, you either go with a reactive application to be fully reactive, or you don't go at all. Moreover, in case of Spring Reactive, you will even see that the framework doesn't allow you to use blocking applications in web endpoints, and it's again for a good reason, because otherwise it will not really make sense. So we need a proper contract that will help us keep everything reactive, because again, you don't keep it reactive. If you don't keep, you can't simply just have part of the application non-reactive, even if it's about the authentication and authorization. So we have the reactive user detail service. Yes, it's not that much of a difference in terms of the naming. You would expect something to be with reactive, easy to remember, but a very big difference is inside the contract, where you will see that the find by username, which is the same method you would have overridden for a non-reactive application, now doesn't return directly the user details, but it returns a mono of user details, mono being one of the publishers in in Project Reactor, and of course in Spring Reactive because of that. So we have mono and flux. Mono because it's basically a producer of only one value. It will either be 1 or 0, values. It will find the user details, or it won't find them. But it's a reactive publisher, because otherwise it wouldn't have worked. So the same philosophy works here. You want to get them from a database. We won't do that today, but it's the same thing that you have already learned in one of the first lessons of this playlist. You want to get them from a database, you implement this method, you get them from the database, and you make sure you take them as a publisher. Of course, for Spring Reactive and for reactive applications, as we discussed in the reactive playlist, we use specific drivers, specific APIs, let's call them, to be generic, to connect to a database. Spring Data itself, we have reactive modules for that. You can't use non-reactive modules with reactive apps. Again, please go to the playlist, and you will remember. In case you didn't see the playlist, you will learn a lot. Today we will use an implementation. So if you go here, you will see that there is only one implementation that Spring Security gives us. It's similar to the in-memory user details manager. And it's an in-memory implementation for the user details. So in order to use it, the only thing you need to do is create an instance of it, and then of course you need to add some user details. And for our demonstration purposes, it's very easy to just create a user details instance using the user builder. So say user with username, build, password 1 2 3 4 5. Remember, this would come from a database. Yeah, authorities, read, it's the minimum you need. Build, and then make sure it's part of the user details service you want. And then we need a password encoder. Fortunately, the password encoder doesn't work with data. It's only a couple of operations. Yeah, the hashing and the matching, they don't need to be reactive. So for this one, you will simply use the normal password encoder you would use with the non-reactive applications. You can use any password encoder. I usually use in examples the no password encoder, but someone told me, hey, Will you use something else as well? Because people get confused, because yeah, no password encoder is marked as deprecated, and then beginners would believe that something they need to use in real world projects. Well, although I always say never use no password encoder in real world projects. It's only for examples. The no password encoder doesn't actually encode. It's called no op for a reason. It doesn't do any operation. So bcrypt, for example, would be maybe the best alternative you have. Bcrypt is a strong hashing function, but if you want to use that, remember also the registered password needs to be encoded. If you don't do that, then of course it won't match. And with that being said, if I'm rerunning the app again, let's see what happened. Did we manage to override the defaults? I would say yes, we managed to override the defaults. So and while starting, let me see what other questions. Thank you very much for the gift. I'm very glad and very happy to be able to help you at least a little bit if I can, and I'm very happy to see that people recognize my work. Hello from Ireland. Hi, thank you very much for being here. Do you think that Loom project will end Spring Reactive? It would be very glad to be able to read the future. I don't think it will completely remove the existing of reactive applications, whether it's Spring Reactive or any kind of other reactive philosophy. In the end, even if they seem to solve the same problem, they do it in different ways, and sometimes we need different ways to solve the same problem. So no, I don't think it will completely remove Spring Reactive. I think there will be always situations where one is better than the other, and we will have to make that compromise like we always do in software. But that's only what I see now. Again, the future is the future, and we will all see it when it comes. Security method pattern is same for both MVC and reactive. When security method, I believe you refer to the so-called global method security in the non-reactive. It's very similar, but it only works with the pre-authorized annotation. I'm going to get into that like in this video, so stay here with me and you will see it in case that was the question. Cool. With that being said, I've managed to start the application. No more lot of logs here. I only have, you see, 4 lines in the log, and I don't have that password anymore, so it means that I might have managed successfully to do what I wanted, which is configuring my app. And I will be sure that I did it now, because I will simply try to log in with blen12345, and if that works, and yeah, it works, it means I've done it correctly. So I managed to configure my app in a way in which I have provided an object to manage the user details. Now, you know, if you will implement this interface and add the instance of your implementation in the context, it will work no matter what, regardless of what the implementation is. So if you want, and that's probably what you will want to do in a real world app, please implement this contract and use reactive ways to get the data from the database. It will work the same as it does for mine here. And you have seen that the new syntax that I've used here for authorization works as well. In terms of more things, we were very much aware of the fact that we have the matchers method in non-reactive applications. For non-reactive applications, we have the ant matcher, MVC matcher, and regex matcher. Some of you are already aware that they have been also replaced starting with version 6 of Spring Security, and now we are only using the method named request matchers. However, the name of the method in reactive applications is a bit different. It's called a path matcher, but it works very similarly. So we have 3 overloadings of the method. One that only takes the end pattern for the paths, one that only takes the HTTP method to apply, and one that takes both HTTP method and the end pattern. So it's basically similar to how the request matchers are for version 6 of Spring Security for non-reactive apps, and it's very similar to how MVC matchers and unmatchers worked for the previous. So now it's path matchers, and you can say like demo, and then you can apply whatever you want. Say has any authority, I don't know, read. Would that work? It should. So we can test that. We can even add a second user here, and we can prove very easily that if the second user has different authority, say this is Josh, if it has a different authority, then they should not be able to access that path, that route. So U1, U2. Well, let's test it. Let's see if it's working as we expect. And come on. Oh, is that already? No, now it is. So it started. 12 seconds. A lot from my point of view, but that's it. And demo endpoint, I'm trying to use Josh first. So Josh should not be able to access this path. So let's see what happens. Access denied. That's good. It's what we expected. Now I need another session. Maybe it works with a different tab. Does it? No, it doesn't. Oh my god. Let me do like this. New incognito window. Because now it keeps the session cookie, you know, and that's why it doesn't allow me. And I will try with Bill. For Bill, that should work. So here it is. And it's working. Oh, and by the way, stupid me, I think I should have simply log out, and then I could, yeah, then I should have been able to log in here as well. Too late today. Cool. And so we proved, and again, I'm not going into details, because if you have seen the first videos of this playlist, you know how to do this for non-reactive apps. So this is very similar. It's almost identical, I would say. So I don't want to like get you bored with repeating the same things again, since you know that they work similarly. The same way, and again, I'm not going to go into details. Maybe you are wondering, CORS and CSRF, are they the same? And yes, they are kind of the same. The only difference go in case you want to customize the mechanisms for tokens, where again there will always be in this case reactive implementation. So here you will see it's this object server CSRF token repository, which is designed specifically to return publishers. For the configurations, the default configuration will be the same as for non-reactive apps. If you want to customize the tokens and stuff like that, the only difference will be, and I hope you already expect that, you will always have methods working with reactive publishers. So again, same for other configurations, CSRF or CORS. Only the mechanism itself is customized a bit differently. And now about the question regarding to the methods, do we have method security for reactive applications? The answer is yes, we have. We need to enable it first, and the method is enable reactive method security. Now I know in one of the latest versions this use authorization manager has been added, which is a default on true anyway. You have no reason from my point of view to put it on false. This is actually an optimization that has been added very recently. and it works from the last thing I knew is that it worked only with pre-authorized, so the and maybe post-authorized, but I'm not 100% sure. But last time when I checked, the pre-filter and post-filter were still in the backlog for implementation, and I can't say I have seen that in practice yet anywhere. However, to be honest with you guys, and you might already have seen that if you're working in real applications, pre-authorized is most abused of the annotations, which makes a lot of sense. So I think that should be enough. So if I want to say here, I want this to be accessible, or maybe let's say, because I can simply just do it like this. So I cut this out, so I comment this out, and I will apply the same rule at the method level, okay, just to make it similarly and easy to test. And then I say pre-authorize, and I apply the rule. So I say pre-authorize has any authority read. Yeah, it's identical. It's the same one that we have used on the endpoint level, but instead of putting in the filter, now it will be interpreted by an aspect, and that's it. So it should work the same. And if we prove that this is working the same, then it means that we did a good job. So let me restart and prove that. And then the last subject for today will be the usage of the security context. And I think if you know that, you can now do whatever you want on your reactive applications, because the rest are very similar with the non-reactive ones. So these differences, if you know them, then you will be able to use whatever you want. So I'm trying this demo, and I try with Josh, and Josh should not work. Okay, so it should be access denied, and then I log out from my application, and then I'm trying to access demo again. It asks me to log in, and I should prove that Bill can access the route, and Bill can access the route. That's right, and that makes sense. So now we prove that we basically managed to apply the same authorization rule. I moved it from the filter level to the aspect level this way. The security context, and this is the last subject for today. The question, and that's something you might face in real world apps: how do we get the user details anywhere in the application? Because you were used to use a security context holder, get context, and then get authentication. And what if I here say something, want to have an endpoint giving me it would be the user details, maybe a string with the username? Can I do that? Can I create an endpoint that returns a string with the name of the user, the logged in user, the user that authenticated? Because it would have been very easy to do that in a non-reactive application. And in a non-reactive application, you would have written something like security context holder, get context, get authentication, get name, or something like that. And this will not even work now. It will fail with a null pointer exception. So I'm pretty sure if I would restart this and try the user endpoint, it will simply fail with a null pointer exception. So then that's because this get authentication should not be there. I'm not even sure about the context. I'm not sure that the context exists. This might exist, but this one I'm pretty much sure it's a null. So at least one of these should be generating a null pointer exception. Okay, let me check which one. So if I'm going to say user, it goes to login. I try to log Bill in, And then when I sign in, of course, I get an error page, an null pointer exception, and it tells me that, where is it? Tells me that authentication is null. Yeah, exactly. So the context exists, is probably created out of the box at the holder creation, at the holder access, but the authentication doesn't exist because this is no longer the security context holder you can use in a reactive app. And the reason is, again, even the security context holder should work in a reactive way, should work with publishers Mono and Flux. So instead you should work with reactive security context holder get context, and then you can't even return a string anymore here. Now you will have to return a mono of your string because the endpoints themselves, you know how a reactive app works. And again, if you don't, the playlist is there for reactive fundamentals. Some subscriber will register to these publishers in the end. So the routes, these are not like real endpoints, they are routes. So you need to make sure that they do return not directly an object, but a reactive publisher. And then you can maybe map to whatever you want here, security context authentication, and from the authentication get name, I guess it was, and that's it. Okay, and again, we need to work reactive, we need to work in a functional way, we need to work how Project Reactor is meant to be worked with. We cannot simply just try to get things out. So you can't, if you try, I can try if you want, if you want to get out the object from the mono and return it, this will not work, because that would mean you have to use a blocking operation. And remember, blocking operations are not allowed in web reactive applications. So you must use the publishers the way they have been designed, otherwise it will not work. Okay, so if let me try again, user, and I log in with Bill, and it works. Okay, so you see the username here has been returned in the response. So here it is. It's basically a little bit different, but it resembles very much to things that you have already learned. So fortunately, you don't have to do a lot of things anymore. So it's very similar. Last question: can't we use the authentication principle user as argument to fetch details anymore? Yes, I think that still works, and we can test it. I'm not even 100% sure, because I wanted to show you here the difference between that is when you use the authentication principle, you need to put it as a parameter and expect Spring to inject it. But this one, well, you can use it anywhere in the application, and sometimes with reactive apps what you want is to merge some streams. So you can't simply have this. Let me see if it's working, because if it's working, by the way, say principle. Okay, if it's working, first of all, it cannot be the user that way anymore. It should be something like authentication principle mono of user details. That's it. So if that works, it anyway should be in a reactive way. It's very simple, easy to prove here. So just to answer your question and make sure I answered all the question, principle, and then here would be map to it's not user details, it's actually authentication, should be map to authentication get name. Yeah, so that should be theoretically the same thing. So I have to make sure that I want to answer your question if that's possible or not. If that's still not possible, I will research it, because again, guys, I don't know all the things by heart, I have to admit. So I know a lot of things, but not all of them by heart. But that's what I would expect it to be. So this is what I would expect it to work like. So that's here, principal build, and no, it works. So it works as expected indeed. The difference being that you need to use, of course, publishers, because we are in a reactive application, so it's not the authentication directly, but a mono of the authentication. Cool, and we've seen that as well. Thank you very much for noticing me about this missing. I hope you can see the difference being, of course, this is something you can call anywhere, because it's, as you see, a simple static method, while this is something you expect Spring will inject, and it will only work in a Spring bean, and that's the parameter of a method. Which one is best for you? You can choose it. In the end, you get the publisher, and you can merge it with other publishers, and basically process the data in the way you need in your application, because that's the idea. So normally in an app, it's not only about returning the username, it's maybe merging it with some other streams, putting them together, processing them in some way functionally, and then get a result in the end. Okay, that's what we usually do. Okay, with that being said, I'm happy that you've been here with me, and I've seen some interaction. Thank you very much for all your appreciations, and I hope this clarifies also the way Spring Security works for reactive applications. I do invite you stay with me and join me also in the next sessions, and of course, as much as possible, I will plan some next sessions soon, and I will try to share with you more of my knowledge. With that being said, I want to say goodbye. I'm waving. Thank you very much for being here with me. Have a great time for learning, and see you back soon.